because they have seen me do talks before, you'd say. So they would know that I tend to do interactive talks. Because I am going to start, and if people come in, that's all fine. Just so everyone knows, and you can also put that in the chat, Tracy, if you want. I have my social media or my contact information in a bit, and I'll also put it in at the end, because I'm going to talk about what you should do if you get a new job or a new project or get on a new team. And I'm very grateful for Women in Tech, a data platform, Women in Tech, I think, to invite me for this or to accept my talk, because I'm not a woman, I'm a non-binary person. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a data engineer and Scrum Master. I'm a data engineer and Scrum Master at the Tweede Kamer der Staten-Generaal. Basically the Dutch House of Representatives. This is also where I am right now, and we have very fancy tech that can't do Teams meetings that come from other places, I think because of security. But that basically means that I'm looking at you here, but my big screen is over there. So I will sometimes look over there because that's where my big screen is, and I can't see you because I can only copy my screen and not extend my screen, which is fine. And I will also look at my phone every once in a while because, no, I won't use my phone this time. I will only use my laptop. You can always reach me at either Blue Sky, either email. You can go to my website. That might only work if you use HTTP and not HTTPS. I still have to fix that. And another website that is very cool for you to check out if you can use Google Translate or if you're good at Dutch. At the House of Representatives in the Netherlands, we have open data. Basically, all the data we have surrounding our parliamentary process is something you can get to. opendata.tweedekamer.nl. You can just use either an OData query or Python or whatever you want to do something with APIs, and you can know everything about how many meetings we have, how long they take, how many motions every party submits, etc., etc., etc. Very, very cool. So if you're into that, do check it out. If you have any questions, feel free to either use I think it's the GitLab thing they use there, or send me an email, because I can either answer it or send it to my coworkers who can. The coworkers who are in the room with us right now. As I already told you, I always do my instructions. I always do my presentations very interactive. So you can either scan the QR code, go to menti.com and enter the code. You can do that through the whole presentation, actually. It'll still be there. And because I'm going to ask some questions, and I hope you can answer the questions. Because even though I'm talking to some real life people, but I also talk to people on the screen, it's always cool if you can participate. Of course, if you watch this later on the YouTubes, you can't still answer the questions. And I'm sorry about that, but if you want to share something, if you want to share the answers to some questions, I'll ask. Feel free to email, to message, everything is fine. And you can also give hearts, as you can see. And they change color. Very fancy. This is so, people who like to press buttons can press buttons. I first want to see if everything works with Menti, and I also just want to know what your favorite programming or scripting language is. And feel free to, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and I'll ask Tracy to read it to me, because I can't see the questions right now. I think you can also ask questions through Menti, so that's also a very good way to do that. I'm missing something, people. I'm missing my favorite.
Yeah, SQL.
My favorite is SQL, yeah. I do find it funny. I ask this question regularly at when I give talks, and very often it used to be that SQL was a very high up one, and now Python is getting much literally bigger if we use it on the if we use the Menti. But I also really like PowerShell, by the way. I'm really curious about the PowerShell module for Fabric. I'm going to another conference next week, and I hope to learn something about that as well. I'm very glad that SQL is okay too, though. And we have some like deep data people here. This is why R is on the screen. I also would like to know, like, do you have people who are very experienced, people who are just, you know, beginners? Let me know how long you've been working in data. I think I would be at the 4th now. I'm at the 5 to 12 years. I'm about 8 years in data. Then again, I studied psychology, so that's where I also did a lot of data. But then I did some like help desk work. Yeah, at many different companies. And we have a very broad spread here. And I'm thinking that Tracy might be the 15 years one.
Yes, I feel old now.
Aw, I don't think you're much older than I am, though. And I like the even spread. It's very cool. It's funny because I know there's at least one person here who doesn't work in data. And so I think, yeah, I maybe should add that as an option. Like, I'm not planning on working in data anyway. So welcome to the first day at your new job. And where I say new job, you can also think new project, new team, new unit. I tend to use the term job here, but it can be many things. And I also want to mention that I'm Dutch. I'm European, Western European, and that's the culture I come from. And we do things in a certain way. And I think many of the things I mentioned will be applicable to like many cultures and many different people. But do keep in mind that my perspective might differ from yours. I tend to give you like checklists, basically, of things you have to keep into account. But the examples I give might be more applicable to more of a European and maybe even sometimes a more Dutch situation. Because we have a specific working culture. We're direct, usually. And that also like influences how things look in companies and organizations. First, we're going to talk a bit about how do we work at this new job? How do you fit into it? What about me? Or what about you? We're going to talk about politics, which is extra funny since I'm working for the House of Representatives. And then we're going to talk about data a bit. It might be that the actual data part is cut a bit short because depending on how much interaction we have, I think the first parts are more important. Because before we do data, we're humans. And we have to take care of the human side of things first to make sure we can do a good job with the data we're using. So if it seems I have a lot of slides to go, I'm aware of that. It's not a problem. I can see a clock in the corner of my eye. So how do we do work here? I am still going to grab my phone because my phone has the notes from the presentation. And even though I have very nice bullet points, I don't want to forget things. The first thing, if you get to a new job, and that might be something you have checked out like during your solicitation, your onboarding process, check out the goals of the company. What is the main goal of the company? What is the main goal of the product you might be working on? Is there a motto? Is there what does the company want? And that can be very general sometimes. And it might not always completely reflect on how things look at the surface, at like the main job you're doing. But I think it's an important thing to know in the back of your mind. Then, what's your literal work assignment? What do you do? And is that exactly the same as what you were hired for? Or might it be that there's some other stuff going on? Because I think people who have been working in data or working in general a bit longer might know that the job description doesn't always completely fit how the job actually looks. Yes. Which is sad, but maybe sometimes also good. But it's a thing you should be aware of. Another important thing is that you should know how work gets to you. How do you know what to do on a daily basis? Sometimes you have a bigger project. Sometimes you work in like Scrum teams. Sometimes you have your dailies. Sometimes You do a lot of ticketing work, you have more operational work, and then you get like tickets or emails or calls. Is everyone allowed to tell you what job you have to do today? Or is that just certain people? That's important to know. How do you know what to do? And what the time frame on that is. And if someone asks it, can you just do it? Or do you need to check it with someone else? The last thing that I really want to mention, is the tech stack. We're going to talk about that a bit later, but it's important to know, like, can you use the tools you always want to use? Are there specific tools you have to use? Are there specific versions of the tools you have to use? For example, Visual Studio, if I use version 12 and you use version 13, we'll have a problem. And maybe it's a Microsoft company, maybe it's a more Linuxy company, maybe it's an Amazon company, maybe we do everything in the cloud, maybe we do everything on premise. Maybe you're allowed to use open source tools, maybe you're not. Maybe you're allowed to use plugins, maybe you're not. Very important to know, like, what are the boundaries? What are the framework within which you can work? Communication. Communication is kind of important, apparently. And what is also important is how you like to communicate. What do you prefer to work with? Do you like emails? Do you like talks? Do you like everything over chat? And there's, of course, opinions on what the company usually does, and I'll get into that a bit later, but I think it's also very important to know what your preferred mode of communication is. And I'm really wondering, because I created this a while back, I think when we were still very much in lockdown, and I'm now looking at it and thinking, am I missing something? So if you're like, hey, this kind of communication is not in here, please let me know. And I know this one takes a bit longer because it's for everything you have to do a thing. It's very nice how people... I feel people really like face-to-face meetings here. And people don't like emails. And people really don't like WhatsApp or relevant. I also really dislike using like private apps for work. I do it sometimes, especially if I'm like getting late or if I find something very cool on the weekend and then I text Jarek, hey, look at this cool thing I found. But I try to like send it to myself and then email it or Teams it to my coworkers in like on Monday. But sometimes I'm like, this is so cool, Jarek, you have to see this. And he knows that he can ignore it if he wants to. Like, it's we tend to have good conversations on how we communicate here and how, when you can ignore things. Face-to-face really jumps out. People also like ticketing systems. I've seen that differently. It's a good way to communicate, especially because it's a way of that everyone knows the same thing. Like, everyone can look at it. And that's also the same with like group chat. It's good to know if people don't like to get their messages like on their private phone. That's an important thing to know, because it means you shouldn't do that, basically, especially because it's a private thing, not even it's not a work thing. Because you have to think about how you communicate, and every organization is different. Especially if you talk with like end users, if you talk to people who are not techies, if you do like operational work, very often there is one system that you use to communicate with like your end users. Very often it's like a top desk, ServiceNow ticketing kind of system through which you can also send emails. Very often the way you communicate within your smaller team is different as well. That can even differ a lot between organizations. I know that we as a team, as our data team, we use a lot of Teams, but many other teams in the organization tend to still use a lot of email or use a lot of mostly face-to-face things. And that's important to know, like, how do you get in touch with someone? Then you, of course, have the organization itself. Can you even email the whole organization? That differs between organizations a lot. Here you can't. I've been to organizations where you could do it only if you gone over several steps, like if you've gotten all the certain permissions from everyone. And if you want to do something like that, do you do it over like maybe an intranet, Yammer, Viva Engage kind of thing, or do you do it in another way? And do you do it over email or over, I don't know, whatever tool you have? If you communicate with like the outside world, that is not relevant for everyone, but I know we have some coworkers who make like reports that they send to people outside of this organization, or even normal people in the world who communicate with people from the Netherlands who like ask the parliament questions. How do you do that? Is that always email? Do we use social media for that? How does that work? What are the rules? Do you, what are the rules surrounding that? And I think that's important to know, even if it's not a role you have, to communicate with outside facing and in an outside facing role. Another thing I really want to add here is social media, because that's a thing that most of us have, that most of us use to communicate. And sometimes you want to communicate about things that relate to your job. I mean, like I'm a techie, I work in data, I post a lot about data. So I also post sometimes about things that relate to like literally my job. Is that a thing that's allowed? If it's not allowed, maybe don't do that. Is it only allowed if you really say this is my personal opinion and doesn't reflect on the company I work for? Or is it something you can do like freely? That's a thing to think about in this day and time. And also freedom of speech works differently in every country. So do think about that as well. And different sometimes from the roles you have, because we're civil servants, so things are a bit different anyway than if you would work for like a commercial company. Then again, for a commercial company, they might be easier with like getting rid of you if you say really bad things about the company. So it's a complex situation, and I think you should really like discuss it, maybe even already at your like your job interview, not to be like combative or aggressive about it, or be like, I want to say all the things, but just to know what is expected of you. We already talked about that a bit. The tech stack, how do we work? Will you get a laptop? I got a laptop. I'm looking at the laptop right now. But before that, we had like fat clients and thin clients. Do you need to bring your own workstation maybe? That might work if you're like a contractor. You might not get your own laptop, your own phone. And how do you get to your sources? How do you get to the data sources you use? If it's just online sources, it might be a bit different. But if you have like databases that are either like in an Azure or even on-premise, how do you get to them? For example, we connect to servers that connect to the databases. We don't do that from our own workstation, but that's different. Applications. I already mentioned something about that. Which ones can you use? Which ones are you allowed to use? Which ones are you explicitly not allowed to use? Do you have like a list of things you have to install first? How does that work? Other important thing is, of course, version control. I'll give a talk about that on Wednesday if you're at SQL Bits. I'll talk a lot about Git and how to get it on your computer and how it actually works and how you can apply it in your data work. But important to know is what can go in version control. Are you allowed to put everything in there? Are you allowed to put data in there if that works out that way for some reason? How careful do you have to be with authentication? How are there like, what's the branching strategy you use, for example, in this organization? How does it work? Who does your pull requests? Who reviews your pull requests? How often do you review code anyway? This comes into the next one, which is coding standards. Are there coding standards? Is there like, do we have rules or regulations surrounding this? Do we maybe have a linter that automatically formats your code for you? Very fancy. Do you have automatic pipelines for things, and who checks the pipelines and who fixes the pipelines? How do you deal with sensitive data? Because of course you can't put that in version control, but maybe there's other rules about that as well. Especially if you like work for a hospital, you work with patient data. You can't just put that everywhere. Also make sure that you remember to lock your screen. That's something that is Not as enforced in every organization, but I think it's good, like digital hygiene. Last thing, authorizations and access. It's not a point on there, but it's important. How do you get to something? Not in a technical sense, but if you notice you need access to a certain database or a certain application, who do you talk to? Where do you send a message? Is there tooling for it to get stuff, or do you have to like ask a specific person? This is everything on the techie side of things that you have to keep in mind and that you should like think about if you're new somewhere. We're going a bit more private now. And what because you're a person, as I said, you start out as a human. I'm asking these questions to make you think. Feel free to not type anything in and just think about it. You can also type anything in and we'll keep it private and your name is not attached and people will see it online, but like I said, not with your name. So no one will know who it is. I am asking the Dutch people on here to please answer in English. Because else it's not very nice for the people who watch it later who might not know Dutch.
Are you talking specifically about the nervousness of surrounding a new job?
I'm going to repeat the question because I'm not sure if people can hear, but how do you act when you're nervous is the question. And it's not just about surrounding a new job. I'm answering the question, but it was like, is it only about the new job thing or more in general? It's in general, because you can be nervous because of the new job, but I think it's just important to know how you look like, how you feel, how you present your nervousness to the world, or how you try not to present your nervousness to the world, which might also be a certain kind of behavior. I also talk faster. I also, I can get argumentative. I can get like into discourse. People might think I'm nervous if my hands shake, but that's because of a medical condition. So my hands always shake, which is why I try that if I give a talk, I don't hold paper because the paper will do this. And that looks very nervous, even though I'm not. People say interesting things. People say that they're quiet or very talkative. People withdraw, people procrastinate. I get that as well. Oversharing is a thing that I can also relate to. I used to do that, I think. It says that I can press space to group responses. I think it'll fail, but I'm going to try. Yeah. I don't have access to AI tools, which I'm very glad about, but I wanted to try it anyway. Too pleasing. Oh, I get that too. If I'm very nervous, I'll try to appease everyone, and that's not very handy. Thank you for this. And I think it's good that you know, because it's important to know what you need in your work life, as a person in general. It's important to know what you need from your coworkers. It's important to know what you need from your boss. I'm looking at my boss, who's in this room. It's important that you can tell them, hey, I really appreciate it if I get a compliment every once in a while. I really like it if I get very detailed feedback on things. It's important for me to sometimes get in a bit late because I really like my late mornings, but that means I will continue to work later. Is that possible? Know what you need. Know do you like to talk about personal things at work, or don't you like to talk about personal things at work? That's not something you have to like explicitly say, but it's an important thing to know, and don't be afraid to set boundaries. Listen. That's important, especially in your first months. I saw some people say, and I'm one of those people who like talk too much. That's why I give talks. Try to listen, because you don't know why things are done the way they're done. Maybe it seems very inefficient to you, or very wrong, or you know much better ways to do it, but maybe there's very good reasons why things evolved the way they did. Another thing is that you should be aware of people's children, which is related to the listening. If you don't listen, you can't know what people's children are, what the things are people have like built themselves maybe and put a lot of time and effort in and that they really see as theirs, even though they might not explicitly say that. And that's something to keep in the back of your mind. Of course, you can change things. If you've been there for a while, you can say, hey, maybe we could do this thing in another way. But if you do that without enough care, without enough compassion, you can really step on people's toes, and that's not fun for everyone. So listen, ask questions, don't assume things. Assuming makes an ass out of you and me. You should be you. And, but still know, like what I just asked about the nervousness, if you know you're very talkative, take some extra breaths. If you know you tend to procrastinate, try to like use your time management toolings to maybe make it easier to not procrastinate or use some accountability. If you know you withdraw, be aware of that and maybe trigger yourself to ask questions, simple ones. How do things work? And never forget they hired you for you. They wouldn't have hired you if they didn't think you were capable. And that means you're like a capable, smart person. We're going to talk about politics. And I know many people don't like to talk about politics. I should change this picture to one of our own parliament, by the way, and not this one.
I think we love talking politics here.
We do love talking politics here, but I'm more talking about organizational politics and not politics, I'm sorry. But I also know that many tech people just want to do their tech job, which I get. But you can't get around to the fact that every organization has politics. One of them is feedback. Is it even an organization that does feedback? Do they only give positive feedback? Do they only give negative feedback? I've worked in teams like that. It's not fun. Can you give feedback to the people like your nearest coworker? Can you give feedback to your manager? Can you give feedback to the people who work for you? Is it only done like at the 360 interview yearly thing, or is it done at other places as well? Are there like strategies? I should give a talk on feedback. That would be fun. But find this out. Might not be something you ask explicitly or ask just one coworker maybe. Find out how the feedback works in your organization. Hierarchy and honorifics. Is this an organization where emails are very formal? And to whom are they formal? For example, here we also talk to politicians sometimes and people who are the representatives. This communication tends to be a bit more formal, which is fine. But it's something you need to know, that you're not like, hey, I fixed your thing. Well, you should have said, dear Mr. blah, blah, blah. Does the organization work with people or with people in roles? Is this an organization where if you want something to happen, you have to talk to Richard? Or is it an organization where you have to talk to the manager of the certain team? This is a small difference, but can make a very big difference. Sometimes people do things, and sometimes they do things because of the role they have. And organizations that don't differ between that much need a bit of a different approach sometimes. Sometimes you need to be like create relationships with people, and sometimes that's less important, even though I think it's always important to create relationships with people, but it's important to know, like, do you need a certain person? Do you need the role they have? And is this a thing that's the same everywhere in the organization or just for certain teams? And is it something that's static or is that something that's changing? Also depends on how old the organization is, etc. Money makes the world go round. I don't mean the pay you get. I mean, how much money does the organization have and how much can you spend as an employee? Which is getting more and more important if we move more and more to cloud services where you pay per use, basically, per cycle, per whatever. Can you just run a job? And if it runs too long and it costs like, I don't know, 10,000 euros, dollars, is that a problem? For some organizations, it's a bigger problem than others. A very good friend of mine works at Netflix. If you do a job and it's wrong, like a data job, and it costs like $1 million and you do that over a weekend, you get a stern look, but it's not a problem. If we do that here, we might have an actual problem, and other things might happen. It's important to know these things, especially in this day and age. But it's also important to know, like, if you want to buy a book to learn things about, or a course, can you buy these books? Can you, what's the word again? Can you declare them to your company? Can you not? Are you allowed to go to, like, conferences? Will they pay? Will they not? If you want to have drinks with coworkers outside of work, can you do that? Is that paid for? Is that not paid for? Is it until what level? Are you allowed to send in your requests? It's important to know this. I've worked for like a lot of non-profit companies, and their money was tight. I've worked for a hospital. Their money was tight. That means you have to look at these things in a bit of a different way. Last one. What is your relationship to your team and the rest of the organization? Do they like your team? Do they think your team is nice? Do they think your team does a good job? Are they maybe a bit mistrustful? Do they think you might take their job because you also do all the AI stuff? So you might want to, I don't know, get rid of everyone. Is there history there? And that's always hard, of course, because it's hard to find out the history. But it might be good to know, like, if your team is not looked upon favorably, it might be good to know why. Not that you can do anything about it, but it might explain some like emotional reactions and from other people towards your team. And that might be just good to know in the back of your mind, like, hey, my team really did some horrible things way back, so that's why people are more apprehensive now. Might be good to know. And maybe they really like you and they think you're doing an amazing thing because data is very cool. And that means you might get cut a bit more slack if you are a bit slow on a project sometimes. It's good background information. This is a Women in Tech meeting. And this is a question that some people in this room cannot answer. And this is, again, something to think about, not something to, you can type it, you don't have to. But because this is a talk for people with, because they're either women, have another gender, maybe have some other type of marginalized identity, you might have encountered different behavior. You might have encountered racism or sexism or transphobia or any kind of word like that. I do like the yes answer. I think I meant to say, can you give the example? But I could have been clearer. This is a sheet I added especially for this talk. So think about this, because I know I have less in my current job, because I'm more senior in my job now and people have seen that I can do what I say I can do. But when I was still working help desk, when I was still like helping people on the phone, I very often got, am I talking to IT? Yes. Are you sure? Because they would expect a guy answering phone, and I'm not. I think most people were usually happy. I think I got a very weird response once where he actually wanted to talk to my male coworker. Oh, that's interesting. I'm reacting to what I'm reading. Someone who's from a certain province in the Netherlands, which is a bit more rural, like if people can handle the big city. Which is funny, because I know there's probably Americans watching this. Our big cities are not your big cities. Oh, wow. And discussing your identity before sending me to a client, that's also interesting. I have had account managers being apprehensive to send me to a bank. But I don't think they discuss that with the bank. And I'm not sure if that was about my identity or about my, I'm a bit of a hippie, I'm a bit of a leftist hippie, and I think they were afraid that the bank would not like that. I did well at the bank. I left quickly, but it had nothing to do with the bank itself. I'm having some advice for people who have a marginalized identity. Also goes for some other people, but mostly people with a marginalized identity, for them it's, I think, more important. Find your people. You're at this talk, or you're watching this talk later, which means you found this Women in Tech data platform group. which is very helpful. I know that like Tracy, I met Tracy at conferences, and that's lovely because I know that's someone who has my back. I found my girlfriend, who's a trans woman, and I found through her, I found a lot of queer people who also work in data, which really gave me a lot more confidence because it meant that people like me can also do this, which is something you theoretically know, but it helps if you see it happen. It's important that you find people within your team, not your team, your team and your organization and outside of it. Maybe if you're queer in any shape, way or form, maybe there is like a pink network, a rainbow network, gay straight alliance as you have in schools. Maybe that's there. I know in the Netherlands, many organizations, bigger organizations have this. Find your people. Find your people in your team, in the organization or outside of it. And it can be people from like your identity or another marginalized identity, but they can also just be allies. Allies are very important. Know your worth. Like I just said, they hired you for you. That's because you're a capable person. Don't let the imposter syndrome get to you. You know things, you can do things, and you can do the job. Really. Of course, you'll fail sometimes because everyone fails. But know that especially if you have a marginalized identity, the chances that you had to prove yourself and so much more than every, I'm sorry about this, general white cishet dude is quite big. So you're capable and know that. Try to feel that or just repeat it to yourself in the mirror. Something that might seem in opposition to this, be aware of stereotypes. Women are often the people who do the glue work in an organization, who send out the birthday cards, make sure there's coffee, maybe do the minutes in in a meeting. I know there's people like women who don't want to do talks like this about like diversity because they're like, I don't want to be put in that box. I don't mind doing that, but I know that I have to go to Rijkswaterstaat in a minute. I thought I removed all my things. So be aware of the stereotypes that there are surrounding your identity and know if you play into them or not. It's fine if you want to give everyone coffee, but know that it's also a stereotype about women that they do it, and that's a role women are often pushed in. So know what you're doing. And if you are then asked to do the minutes again, the next time say no, because everyone should do the minutes. It's a thing that everyone should do. A thing that's of course very country specific and location specific is that you should know your rights. Discrimination is a thing and very often not allowed. This differs so much between countries that I'm not going to go into that anymore, except that joining a union is probably a good idea. And also finding your people is important there because there's always people who will know more about what your rights are. But know that as an employee, you have rights, and know that you should act on them if they are being threatened. If that's something that's safe for you, this is a very complicated topic. This is why I'm not going to talk about it anymore. Questions so far? I see we still have about 10 minutes. So we're going to talk a bit less about data, but I think we'll live. I don't know this dog, by the way. It's an internet dog. If someone wants to type a question, please do it while I'm continuing, and I'll probably see it pop up, and I'll get into it. Data. Let's talk about data. Because very often, if we work in data, we have end users, we have people we create the data for, or we work with the data for. This is not a sentence. Who are your end users? Are those people who will just click on the report you do? They're clickers. We have many clickers in our company. We have people who like to click on buttons, which is fine. You know, that's why we have all the filters in Power BI. You have people who build things, and you have people who build in Power BI. Which is then sent to the clickers who can click on the Power BI tool or another data viz tool, of course. We use Power BI here most often. Excel. I mean, I think we've all been in organizations where even if you make the most pretty Power BI report, people will want to export it to Excel. I know we have some people here who make very pretty reports, which are more like in Markdown and who are done in R, and which are more like static reports as well. And sometimes there's clicking opportunities. But know if people want to export things to Excel, because it's important to know in how you set things up. Do you make things for tech people? Do you make things for non-tech people? That also changes your approach. With tech people, you might have to explain a bit less. Do you make reports for you? I mean, I like making logging reports. Those I make for me and maybe one coworker and not for other people. And if I make stuff for myself, I really don't care about the names of the columns. If I make something which is for a clicking non-tech person, I have to be very careful about how I name things. But for myself, eh. Managers are a special type of people. They have specific wishes. They like overview. They like that it looks pretty. They might not want to click. They might just want to see it in one go. That's a special type of end user. And don't forget that people will make screenshots and people will make PDFs about everything you do. Sometimes that's the goal, right? Sometimes you make a static report and it is a PDF, but sometimes people create PDFs when they're not supposed to. I want to talk about sources, data sources, and I think this is the last interactive question I have for you. Please tell me what sources of data you have. Think about applications, think about maybe websites, think about the job you do in daily life. Where do you get your data from?
Job and daily life? Both.
Both, yeah. For example, in your private life, you might use your bank data to do pretty things with. I read internet monitoring tools. I read books, a lot of books, which means that I use Storygraph, which is like Goodreads, but better, and not attached to Amazon and owned by a black woman. And they do pretty graphs, and I'm really waiting until they have an API so I can make even more pretty graphs. Scraping of Rijksfinanciën.nl. That's the Dutch financial information. Het Open Data portaal, that's the one I just mentioned. The opendata.tweedekamer.nl. Excels from the internet. Forms, operational databases. What operational databases? What's in the databases? You can't see this, but I got a very like the emoticon for my coworker. But then in real life. Think about applications. I'm missing applications here. I hope you can still see me, even though I'm sitting back a bit, but I can't see myself at the moment. LexisNexis, that's I think also international. BDirect, that's our HR system, newsletters, DevOps. Azure DevOps is meant here, not the tooling in itself. Microsoft Forms, RSS feeds can be a very good data source. Parlist is also one of the parliamentary thingies. SharePoint lists, we've just been talking about this. Emails are good. I'm also thinking, but I know I have a slide that shows things. Lots of teams? Lots of teams. Okay. Security scanners are fun. Even you can have them like just the bleeping kind, and like is someone secure, allowed to go in or not, or maybe you analyze like the pictures. Those are cool. PDFs with tables. Centraal Informatiepunt. The central information point? It's the place at the House of Representatives that if you have questions about parliamentary data, you go there. I'm going to go to the next slide. I mentioned some things, and I think many of them are mentioned. I'm now looking at it and seeing if we skipped stuff. I think agenda and schedule data was not mentioned. I think metadata on like landscape stuff was not mentioned, like how many reports do you have and who can look at the reports and how many applications do you have and who is still using the applications, Purchasing information, many organizations of course buy things. Some specifics, patient data, customer data, order data, security data. I think every company has some security data, but for example, at the House of Representatives, we have a bit more intense security going on, where we all have thingies that we bleep. This is the technical term. So know what sources you have. And I'm showing you now a picture of my old organization, where you can basically see that we had many sources that went through different layers and that might have communicated with each other, to some databases, some more data warehousey things, and then had several end products, which either could be Excel, which could be in like an SAP kind of thing, which could be in Click. We didn't use Power BI, which could be a data cube, or like a dashboard, which was specific in one application because of patient information. I don't know why it shows me the thingies. So you have data warehouse, data lake. Sometimes you have direct, sometimes you have indirect access to your sources. Proprietary tools and applications tend to work a bit differently. And you need to know how like the ETLs and the pipelines and the flows, how they work. How often do they go? Do they go every day, every hour, every 15 minutes? Is it a live connection? Try to get a bit of an overview about like the sources you need, the sources that are there in general, and how they move through your data landscape. Another thing I really want to mention here is, I remembered something and then I forgot it. I completely lost what I wanted to say, so it's probably not the most important. And if it is, you'll have to listen to this talk again at some other point. Are there any questions? Seeing we're almost out of time, if you have questions, I'll have my personal information at the last slide, which I'll show in a bit again. I would love it if you could fill this in. This is basically a sort of short review thingy. The time you spend on this talk, sitting here, listening to me, sitting behind your computer, getting up at 6 or earlier than 6, was it worth the time you spent on the talk? Was it useless? Was it useful? Was it like, hey, it's about an hour? Like I said, I can't relate this back to who you are. If you didn't like it, that's completely fine, because, you know, not everything is for everyone. But if you have specific feedback, please tell me, so I can, you know, improve. I like feedback. And I think you're all very kind. I love how the little blobs are going to the places. I think you can fill this in a bit later. I don't think the talk immediately closes, or like the slides, the online thing immediately closes. These are my social media and my internet. Thank you very much for being here, especially if you were here at a very early time. Thank you for my coworkers for being here, so I didn't have to sit in an empty room, which I really appreciated. And I hope you have a lovely day.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Els. Appreciate you presenting to the WIT group. It was a great presentation. I enjoyed it. I had did a blog post on starting a new job a long time ago with a little bit of your stuff in there, but it was mostly about data, you know, tools and things like that. But some of the, you know, stuff that wasn't, you know, tech. So it's kind of good to have that stuff for people to know, because there's a lot of that stuff that you need to know when you're starting a new job. I seen someone came off camera and might have wanted to say something. Maybe not.
It's fine. You can put it in chat and then I can read it. That's fine too, if I stop sharing. But I want to keep the thing on as long as possible. This is, by the way, Kovu, a cat of mine who is went over the Rainbow Bridge. But I like the picture, so I was like, I'll keep it in.